The drop pod hissed open, releasing a hiss of pressurized gas and the sharp scent of alien pine. The canopy above shimmered in hues of violet and deep green, light filtering down in spectral shafts. 6 students emerged into the forest simulation dome, blinking as their ocular implants adjusted to the biome. At first glance, they looked like any group of young cadets from the Galactic Interspecies Academy, diverse, ambitious, and tightly wound. But only one of them strolled out of the pod whistling. Max Carter, the Academy's lone human representative, adjusted the straps on his survival kit and took in a deep breath like it was just another hike through Oregon. His boots crunched softly over moss-laced roots, and he muttered, "Smells like home." Sort of. The others emerged with varying levels of suspicion. Zik was first, his glistening scales absorbing the filtered sunlight, narrow golden eyes already scanning the terrain. He held a palm-sized scanner that blinked air red before shorting out completely. Electronics disabled. Just as instructed, he muttered. Primitive conditions achieved. Lovely, said Yilna, her feathery crest twitching in dismay as she flapped upward onto a low-hanging branch. Humidity at 84%. My feathers are going to molt. Max tilted his head. Wait till you find out about mosquitoes. The 4th member, Thornix, a 6-foot insectoid with 4 arms and a jittery disposition, stepped out with clicking mandibles. He was clutching a rolled schematic. I have 72 shelter designs optimized for varying biome conditions, he said quickly. Which one should we build? Or shall I assign roles first? Protocol dictates leadership be determined by consensus or provisional meritocracy, Zik declared, straightening. As the highest-ranked tactician, I suggest I lead. We will establish a command post, ration stations, and... Or we could, Max interrupted, crouching to inspect the ground. Find water, build shelter, make fire, classic survival stuff. Zik turned toward him. Your species lacks regenerative capacity, natural armor, or exoskeletal support. Perhaps defer to those better suited to hostile conditions. Max shrugged. Sure. Knock yourselves out. They chose a flat clearing 200 meters from the pod. Max didn't argue. He simply wandered off in a different direction, occasionally making notches in trees, picking up stones, and muttering under his breath. The others, meanwhile, began their grand operation. Thornix dug furiously with all 4 limbs, tossing damp soil into neat piles. Yilna fluttered overhead, dropping twigs and fluff. Zik began measuring tree circumferences, drawing a diagram with his claw. By midday, their makeshift shelter resembled a half-collapsed tent being slowly eaten by moss. Max had vanished. Zik paced in the mud. We need his assistance. However inefficient, humans are adept at improvisation. That must be the reason his species was even admitted. Maybe he wandered off to mark territory, Yilna muttered. Or found something shiny. Thornix twitched. Or got eaten. But Max wasn't dead. He was 50 meters away, just out of sight, sitting on a sun-warmed boulder while braiding vines into cordage. Around him, logs were propped in a triangular frame, bark stripped neatly, sap scraped into a leaf pouch. When they finally spotted the smoke tendrils curling up through the treetops, they rushed in as a group, half expecting carnage. Instead, they found Max crouched beside a fire pit, roasting something that looked disturbingly like a toad. He looked up. Oh, hey, you guys hungry? Zik blinked. You built that? Alone? Well, yeah. Basic A-frame shelter. Lashings from vine. Fire starters flint and steel. There's a stream about 15 meters east. No predators I could see, but I did set a perimeter tripline. Yilna narrowed her eyes. You set a trap? Just a warning line. Tin cups and some string. Made noise last time I was out in Montana. There was a long silence as the alien students absorbed this. You're supposed to wait for consensus, Zik said, voice tight. Max poked the fire. Didn't realize survival cared about parliamentary procedure. Thornix leaned closer to the shelter, delicately tracing a lash point with one claw. These knots are effective. You taught yourself this. Dad was Army. Mom ran wilderness retreats. I had no choice. As dusk approached, the difference in survival effectiveness became stark. The alien-made tent sagged ominously under the weight of wet leaves. The wind picked up. The temperature dropped. Max's shelter held firm, with the fire's radiant heat warming the air inside. Eventually, one by one, they drifted toward him. He made space without comment, pulling out extra thermal blankets. Even Krzik hesitated only a moment before sitting stiffly beside the fire. No one said thank you. They didn't have to. Night settled over the simulated forest, and the stars above glittered cold and artificial through the dome's semi-transparent canopy. The wind whispered strange cries from deep in the woods, punctuated by insect chirps and distant howls. The alien cadets huddled closer. Max lay back with his arms behind his head, watching the firelight dance across the curved roof of leaves. Day 1. He muttered to no one in particular. Not bad. From the darkness, Yilna's voice came, hesitant. Max, how long do you think this test lasts? 3 days, he said. Plenty of time. Krzik grunted. Time for what? Max grinned. To build something better. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving a slick sheen on every leaf, branch, and alien face. Yilna fluttered down from a perch above the shelter, ruffling damp feathers and groaning. Thornix blinked all 4 eyes as he examined the collapsed tarp shelter, which had caved inward during the night. Krzik stood rigid, his scales twitching in displeasure. The fire from Max's camp still glowed, embers gently pulsing like a heartbeat in the damp chill. Max was already awake, standing high on a boulder, scanning the tree canopy. In his hands, he held 2 long branches like surveying staffs. He turned toward the group, grinning. All right, today we're moving up. Ground's too wet and too vulnerable. Treehouse time. Yilna looked horrified. You want us to live in a tree? I am not a nestling. Gravity gives you a height advantage, Max said, pointing toward a sturdy trio of interlocked trees nearby. Rain runoff is better up there, predators are worse down here, and it gives us visibility. Unless you want another soggy night with something sniffing your feet. Thornix hesitated, one mandible twitching. What exactly is a treehouse? Max dropped the branches and began sketching a simple diagram in the mud with a stick. 3 trunks and a triangle, connected by a platform, then a basic A-frame roof lashed from scavenged branches. Elevated platform. Think of it like a command post, but built from scratch. Krzik narrowed his eyes. The time expenditure may outweigh the benefits. We already have a shelter. Max pointed over his shoulder. You mean that sad leafy puddle? No one defended it. Eventually, with some grumbling, the group divided tasks. Max led the way, guiding them in collecting branches that passed his quick strength tests. He would snap one in half and listen for the sharpness of the crack, tossing it aside if it was rotten or too brittle. Yilna reluctantly took to the air again, her wings at least useful for scouting tree heights and spotting broken limbs. Thornix, strong and precise, carried logs in his lower arms and stripped bark with the upper pair. Krzik, surprisingly, began mapping out structural stability based on tree spacing, offering efficient layouts that Max adjusted only slightly. They worked with a rhythm none of them expected. Max didn't bark orders, he gave challenges. Bet you can't tie a square lash faster than me. Thornix took the bait and beat him. Yilna found she could use molted feathers as insulation once Max suggested weaving them into bark panels. Krzik discovered a deep satisfaction in watching theoretical plans come to life, with tangible results. By midday, the foundation was suspended nearly 4 meters off the ground, a web of vines and interlocking planks shaped like a giant spider's catch. Max tested the first platform by jumping on it. It wobbled, creaked, and held. Not bad for a bunch of amateurs, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Krzik tilted his head. I find myself surprised. You're efficient, despite lacking formal architecture training. Max snorted. My cousin once built a treehouse that had a mini fridge and a slingshot turret. This one's practically primitive. Yilna settled beside him, brushing her wing against the platform to test its texture. Do all humans do this kind of thing? Only the fun ones, Max replied. The roof came next, woven tightly with bark strips, overlaid with broad leaves to repel water. Thornix began developing his own modifications, adding curled branches along the outer frame to hang supplies. Yilna layered feathers and moss between roof panels to act as natural insulation. Kaarzik optimized the spacing to balance weight distribution. As the sun dipped behind the treeline, casting golden light across their strange wooden fortress, they sat together for the first time, not huddled in panic or sheltering from cold, but perched above the ground in a structure they had built with their own hands and claws. Max handed around compressed food tabs. Gourmet dining tonight. Thornix chewed a tab slowly. This is the first time I haven't felt like I'm failing. Yilna let out a short laugh. You think you're failing? I've never even carried a stick before this trial. Max looked around at the others, something shifting behind his usual easy grin. You're not failing. You're just not used to being uncomfortable. That's where humans thrive, discomfort. We've had thousands of years of cold, hunger, rain, war, bad food, worse leaders, and everything in between. We didn't get to space by being the strongest or the smartest. We got here because we're too stubborn to die. There was a long silence as the fire crackled between them, suspended in its stone-lined basin just outside the treehouse. Below, the forest hummed with life, distant rustling, soft growls, and the occasional alien screech echoing through the undergrowth. Kaarzik finally said, "Your species is more complex than I anticipated." Max leaned back against a tree trunk, watching the last of the daylight fade. Yeah, we get that a lot. Then a branch cracked below. Everyone froze. Yilna's feathers puffed. Thornix reached for a sharpened stick he'd shaped earlier. Kaarzik's claws flexed reflexively. Max stood, squinting into the dark below. Something was moving, a slow, deliberate rustle that didn't match the pattern of small fauna. Heavy, measured. He stepped to the edge of the platform, holding a burning branch as a torch. "Stay here," he said. "If it climbs, kick it in the face." He descended quickly, with a practiced slide down one of the reinforced vines. The shadows thickened around him, swallowing his figure as the flame illuminated trees in flickering bursts. Something growled low and long. Up above, the others peered down anxiously. Thornix whispered, "Do we assist?" "No," Kaarzik muttered, eyes unblinking. "We observe. If this is where he dies, I want to learn how it happens." But Max didn't die. Moments later, the flame grew brighter and the growling ceased. A crashing sound followed. Then silence. When Max climbed back up, his sleeve was torn, his cheek marked with a faint scratch, and he was holding what looked like a claw the size of a machete. He tossed it on the floor. Big guy. Didn't like fire. Yilma stared at it. "What species?" "No idea," Max said. "But I named him Greg. Greg's not coming back." Kaarzik looked at the claw, then at Max. "You're not just stubborn. You're dangerous." Max sat down, stretched out and grinned. "I try." The treehouse creaked gently in the wind as night fell. This time, none of them feared the dark. The third day began with a silence that was too complete. No birdsong, no rustling, just the wind brushing against bark and leaves, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Max stood on the treehouse platform, squinting into the morning haze. Something felt off. Thornix emerged first, stretching all four arms and clicking his mandible softly. "The air tastes wrong." "Pressure's dropped," Max said. "Storm's coming. Probably fast and nasty." Kaarzik climbed up from a lower level, already holding the emergency blankets. "Structural reinforcements must take priority. High winds will stress the lashings." Yilna landed with a flutter. "Something passed near the tree during the night. I found a trail. It circled us. Twice." Max processed all three updates at once, adjusting his mental plan. "All right. We're in for a double feature. Big storm, maybe a predator sniffing around. We stick together and lock this thing down." They worked quickly. Thornix and Max reinforced the main supports with tension vines anchored to rocks below. Yilna added overlapping leaf layers to the roof, creating runoff channels. Kaarzik directed efforts with concise precision, his usual arrogance replaced by something closer to command efficiency. By mid-morning, the first tremors of wind reached the treetops. The structure groaned, but held. Max tested the flex by bouncing lightly on the platform, satisfied when it creaked but didn't shift. We're good. Not hurricane grade, but we're not going to get tossed like salad either. Lightning cracked across the sky, far too close. Rain followed instantly. Sheets of it poured over the canopy, hammering the roof with wet percussion. The fire pit below extinguished in seconds. They were locked in now. Inside, they sat in a rough circle. The interior was dim, but dry. Water dripped through in spots, but only gently. Max looked around at the makeshift home they'd built, at the aliens huddled in silence, and knew they'd done well. Then the sound came again. Not wind, not thunder. Scraping. A rhythmic, climbing scrape, wood on bark, claws on wet trunk. The temperature in the treehouse seemed to plummet. It's back, Yilna whispered. Greg had a friend. Thornix moved toward the hatch, holding a sharpened stake, his body posture tense. We cannot let it reach the platform. If it damages a support during this wind. It won't, Max said, voice calm. He grabbed a coil of vine, a wrapped torch, and the lighter. Keep the entrance sealed. Give me 3 minutes. Max, Kaarzik started. No time. He dropped through the hatch with practiced speed. Outside, the storm clawed at him. Wind howled through the trees, and rain blurred his vision. He slid down the reinforced support and hit the mud hard, rolling with the impact. He didn't stop to breathe. The creature was halfway up the far trunk, large enough to shake the entire treehouse with its movement. Matted fur, too many eyes, hooked claws tearing into bark. It didn't growl this time. It climbed like it belonged there. Max circled behind it, keeping low, torch tucked under one arm as he struck the lighter again and again with wet fingers. The first 2 attempts failed. The third caught. The flame burst to life, guttering in the wind. He yelled, not words, just sound, raw and defiant, and threw the torch onto the creature's back. It howled and twisted, slashing at itself as the fire spread. The wet fur smoked violently. The predator tumbled from the trunk, hitting the ground with a sickening thud and a splash of mud. Max backed up slowly, a second torch ready, breathing hard. Above, the others watched through gaps in the floorboards. Kaarzik spoke first. That wasn't instinct. That was strategy. Max reappeared minutes later, soaked, gasping, but smiling like he'd just finished a 10K run. Big Ugly's not coming back either. Thornix handed him a dry cloth. You could have died. Max took it and began drying his face. Not today. The storm raged for another 2 hours, shaking the trees and testing every vine. But the treehouse held. It flexed, creaked, swayed, but it survived, just like its builders. When the wind finally calmed and the rain tapered into mist, the beacon at the edge of the forest lit up with a soft chime. Extraction in 30 minutes. They gathered their things quietly, descending from the treehouse one by one. No one spoke of rankings or survival ratings. No one argued over merit. As they stood at the extraction point, waiting for the dropship, Kaarzik finally broke the silence. Your methods defied optimization. Max shrugged. Yeah, we're messy, but we make it work. Yilna stepped closer. Would you teach me that lash knot? The spiral one? Sure. Got time on the flight. Thornix looked at Max with something like awe. Humans are different. Max turned to face them, silhouetted by the rising light behind the clouds. You've all got tech. You've got data, instincts, armor, flight. Humans? We got hammers, rope, and bad ideas that sometimes work. And when they don't, we just build something better. The dropship descended with a hiss of turbines. Max looked back once at the treehouse, still perched high in the branches, a testament to chaos tamed by stubbornness. He smiled. We'll build a better one next time.